St Pancras Church was opened in 1822. It was built in response to a very big increase in population in this part of London. The old St Pancras Church, about a mile away, was simply too small to cope with the number of people. So they invested a huge amount of money in building what at the time was the most expensive church after St Paul's Cathedral in London. And this is it. It seats about 500 people in total.
St Pancras in Britain is actually a very little known saint. He's quite well known across the continent. Pancras himself was a 14-year-old who was a Roman. He converted to Christianity and he was martyred, he was beheaded, as they did in those days, for his beliefs. And he's remembered right across Europe, but as I say, only a few churches in Britain are dedicated to St Pancras. And here he is.
When they decided to build the church, they held a competition, and William Inwood and his son Henry William Inwood went across to Greece and saw all the wonderful buildings at the Acropolis and decided to copy a lot of the Greek style into the building of the church here. So what you have here is very much influenced by classical Greek architecture. The high altar that you see here is by Charles Holden. Holden was a famous architect who did a lot of work in London, including Senate House for the university and also a lot of work for London Underground. The altar was installed in the 1920s, and above the altar those great columns are again copied from Greek temples, and they hold up the roof of the apse. This is the pulpit. It is the original pulpit. It was built using timber from a very famous tree, the Fairlop oak, in Hainault Forest. It was made for the opening of the church here in 1822, but has since been rebuilt. It has been both moved and shortened.
But this was needed when the church was full to the rafters back in Georgian and Victorian times. And it's our understanding that it originally stood up here, which would increase the visibility for everyone in the pews all over the church. And then I think it was moved forward after the war when this area was carpeted and redesigned. These days, with the congregation downstairs only, I'm far too intimidated to use it.
Originally, the church had clear glass windows, as most churches would have done in the early 1800s. But the Victorians in the late 1800s loved putting stained glass into churches, and the stained glass windows you see here are from around the 1870s. They are actually of very high quality and are installed by the Victorians, who, as I say, loved modifying churches, putting this beautiful glass in mostly in memory of benefactors who had donated to the church or who had lived in the parish.
But up here at the front end of the church, left and right, we have the people's memorials that simply record the names of those who lived in the parish who were killed in the war. So they're from all sorts of regiments, all sorts of different areas of conflict, and people could just elect to have their loved ones' names added to that list. So those are very much my favourite memorials in the church.
This is the War Memorial for the St Pancras Regiment from the First World War. It commemorates the 1,069 men in that regiment who died during the war. Their most famous activity was when they entered Jerusalem in December 1917 and received the surrender of the city from the Turks. The regiment itself no longer exists, but we do remain their spiritual home. This is the font. Again, it is not original. It dates from 1887, but the bowl within the font is actually the original. The top half is made from alabaster from Staffordshire, and each face on the top half is decorated differently using gold leaf. The base and the plinth are marble. Probably the most outstanding architectural feature of the church are the Cariatids. There are 8 of them, 4 on each side, and again they are copied from the Greek temples which Inwood saw when he went over there and brought back all those ideas. The Cariatids are the women who hold up the roof, and the story behind them is that when they were made off-site and then they were brought here, they were actually about 6 inches too tall, and they've had to have 6 inches sliced out from the middle of their bodies. You can just see a line through their middles. They are very splendid, but they do need a bit of care and attention as they're getting a bit worn. But they are very beautiful, and they're actually very rare in this country for any church or any building to have Cariatids.
The angel statue in the garden is a statue of the Archangel Michael, who is known as the warrior angel and who figures in Judaism, Christianity and Islam. And it's a very moving statue that was sculpted by Emily Young following the 7/7 bombings in 2005. The bomb that blew up the bus was about 200 to 300 yards from the front door of the church. And so the scars that the angel bears in situ are showing what could have happened from the effect of the bomb blast on the 7th of July. So I find it an enormously significant and moving memorial of that day.
The organ isn't original. It was installed here in 1864, having spent a few years in a music hall in Birmingham. It has, of course, been much restored in its lifetime, but it still makes a fabulous noise and contributes to the worship and concerts that we have here. This is the Blessed Sacrament Chapel. Again, it's part of the rearrangement of the church in the early 1900s, created in 1913. This is in fact the original high altar and the marble surround that was in the main east end of the church. The tower is copied again from the great Greek architecture. It's actually copied from the Tower of the Winds in Athens. It stands 156 feet tall, so in its time it was certainly the tallest building anywhere around this part of London.
So this, come and have a look, this is the only way to get up to the roof and the bell tower. So if you're ready, we can set off up the spiral staircase. So we are quite close to the top of the church now.
It rises up in 3 octagonal stages, again is copied from the Greek architecture that Inwood saw and brought back drawings from Greece.
Welcome to the Crypt Gallery. One of the most atmospheric gallery spaces in London, I imagine. The crypt is where people were buried between 1822, when the church opened, and the 1850s, at which point all burials in central London were forbidden by law. So we've got about 500 residents down here who are still here. We have their names, some information about them, or their addresses at least. So every now and then we get contacted by research scientists, since it's very unique to have a research group of such a discrete area and period, where the records are all in quite good order. So it may yet reveal more secrets. People ask if there are ghosts, but I explain that it's a Christian burial, so of course there aren't. Just at the back in this alcove is our foundation stone, in Greek, of course. But it's engraved with the words, "May the light of the gospel illuminate the darkness of the heathen." I think it was controversial to have such a pagan style of building for a Christian church. Statements like that perhaps were designed to offset that criticism. They've got their own sort of areas in the little alcoves, so people can either purchase a family vault, or there are some common areas for poorer people. We don't know of anyone hugely famous who's down there, but that may just be that we don't know yet. Some of the memorials are up in the church. Some of them are stacked up a bit further back. So about a third of the crypt is used as the gallery. The other 2/3 are still the crypt.